After some days, at the time of wheat harvest, Samson went to visit his wife with a young goat. And he said, "I will go in to my wife in the chamber." But her father would not allow him to go in. And her father said, "I really thought that you utterly hated her, so I gave her to your companion. Is not her younger sister more beautiful than she? Please take her instead." And Samson said to them, "This time I shall be innocent in regard to the Philistines, when I do them harm." So Samson went and caught 300 foxes and took torches. And he turned them tail to tail, and put a torch between each pair of tails. And when he had set fire to the torches, he let the foxes go into the standing grain of the Philistines, and set fire to the stacked grain and the standing grain, as well as the olive orchards. Then the Philistines said, "Who has done this?" And they said, "Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because he has taken his wife and given her to his companion." And the Philistines came up and burned her and her father with fire. And Samson said to them, "If this is what you do, I swear I will be avenged on you, and after that I will quit." And he struck them hip and thigh with a great blow, and he went down and stayed in the cleft of the rock of Etam.
Just when you think you got the world figured out, you run into Samson and a bunch of Philistines. So here we have the beginning of chapter 15. It's wheat harvest time. Some months have gone by. Samson gets sort of a soft spot in his heart for that good-looking Philistine woman, and he trots right back over there, and he takes a goat with him. Now, that's very magnanimous of him, really. She should have been phoning him, shouldn't she? I mean, she had done wickedly to him. He nagged him for a week. He told her the little secret, and she ran right away and blabbed it. Well, I got news for Samson. He shows up, and we got bad news. The Philistine father, because he's a Philistine, remember, says, "Oh, Samson, good to see you, but she's not home because really I didn't know you still liked her, so even though she's your wife, I gave her to, remember that guy who was your best man at your wedding? One of those 30? Yeah, well, he kind of had a thing for her. I gave her to him." Huh? Only Philistines can do those kinds of things. Crazy. So Samson says, "Well, now when I'm angry about this," which is what his specialty is, he gets angry. "Nobody can blame me for this," he says. So what does he do? One of those incredible things. I just said to John, when you're in a tavern and you're telling this kind of a story, if you say to people, "All right, I want you to guess what happens next," they'll guess all kinds of things. The one thing they won't guess is what really happened. I couldn't have guessed this. Samson, in his anger, goes out and captures 300 foxes. Now, if the Bible weren't reliable historically in a lot of ways, this is one of those things that make me catch my breath a little and get a lump in my throat. Catches 300 foxes, ties their tails together, puts a burning something, whether it's an ember or a burning bush of some sort. He ties their tails together with this burning shock of something between them, and he sends them out into the field, into the harvest field now, mind you, of the Philistines. 150 pairs. Now, imagine for a minute that you're actually there, and you're watching these pairs of foxes with their tails tied together. Do you think they're just racing shoulder to shoulder across the field with the fire burning their tail? Well, I'm sure the PETA folks won't like this particular story. I can't imagine that these foxes survived the fire through the field, but I'll bet one thing, none of the field survived either. Can you imagine the helter-skelter and the noise and the squealing and the panic? I picture this as happening at night, and I don't know if it did, but I'm guessing that it probably did. And you can imagine the Philistines rising up from their homes and seeing that glow in the sky and looking out, and all you can see when you head towards the field is this zigzag fire everywhere, no way to contain it. Every field burned to the ground. That's revenge for you. And Samson exacts it because they gave away his babe. Okay? That's where we're at. And it's the craziest things when you're dealing with Samson. Here's what happens, though, what makes it even crazier. Because they're Philistines, what I mean, and wicked people, they all start questioning after the next morning, probably, well, who did this? And they say, well, it was Samson. Remember, he's mad about his father-in-law giving away his bride, and he's done this. Well, they don't hunt Samson right then. They go to the father-in-law's house, and guess who's home now? Yeah, the wife. And guess what happens? They burn it down. If you remember in chapter 14, they said to her, if you don't find out the answer to the riddle for us, we'll burn your house down with you and your dad in it. Here we are in the middle of chapter 15, and they actually did burn the house down. Oh man, how could you guess this thing? Well, now the Philistines are still mad. Why? Well, they've lost all their crops. It's harvest time. Now they've turned their attention after they burned this family down and burned their house out. They're going to turn their attention to Samson. And we're going to see whether the Israelites at this time have any courage at all, or if Samson's the only one in that whole nation that got any spine to him. That's the next section we go to. Okay, now we're going to deal with the last section of chapter 15 of the book of Judges. And Samson has sent the foxes through the field. He's wreaked havoc. His wife and her father have been burned. And now these wicked Philistines come hunting for Samson, who's back across the border in his own land. And they encamped in Judah. Now they come to the men of Judah and they say to them, where's Samson? Now, Samson was justified in burning down their crops, wasn't he? They'd treated him treacherously. They'd schemed to get the answer to the riddle. They'd taken his wife and given his wife to somebody else. And he had exacted vengeance. Now, these people have been so long oppressed by the Philistines that you're ready for them just to rise up and say, Samson's our hero. We'll follow Samson. Get out of the land. Instead, they say, well, all right, let's go talk to Samson. So the men of Judah, instead of fighting on Samson's behalf, go to Samson, and here's what they say. You know, the Philistines rule over us. What have you done to us? The Philistines are angry, is what they're saying. Do you understand? The Philistines they're upset about what you did. You understand what the grief we're going to suffer? Instead of being heroic, they're cowardly. And Samson said, well, I just did what was right, didn't I? But they don't follow him, even though they know him to be a great leader. They don't follow him. They're dispirited, they're downtrodden, they're cowardly, and you can see that they've suffered from letting this Dagon worship be infiltrated into their space and into their land, because the infiltration of it has weakened them. They don't trust God anymore. You don't see anything in this story of these people rising up and crying out to God, should we follow Samson or not? They're just ready to be done with Samson. So he says to them, they say, we've come to arrest you. And Samson says, look, okay, I'll let you arrest me. These are his own people. On one condition, don't kill me yourselves. That tells you what he thought of their character, huh? I've been maligning the Philistines the whole time. Do you think these guys are any better? It's a shame that the Hebrews are so bad at this point in history. So they tie Samson up. Now they promise they won't kill him, but what do you think they're going to do? They're going to deliver him to these guys who are going to torture him. What sort of men are these? Cowards, that's what they are. They've lost the Spirit of God. Kind of like the church is a lot of times, isn't it, in history? And Samson, who's a real hero, they don't want him. So what do? They march Samson down to these murderous Philistines. And what do the Philistines do when they see Samson? They start chanting and shouting and mocking. Well, I'm going to tell you something. Their mocking is going to be turned to shrieking in a minute. Samson, the Spirit of God comes on him, and Samson busts his ropes, and he picks up the nearest thing, which is a jawbone of an ass. And he picks it up, and somehow it holds together, because I don't think it's supposed to hold together, except God's doing it. And he slays 1,000 of the Philistines. All of those who were making fun of him a moment ago are now dead or running from him now. God is tired of the Philistines, even if the people of Judah aren't. Now, don't you think they're going to follow Samson? No. No, he kills 1,000. And here's what happens. He says over here, with the jawbone of a donkey, heaps upon heaps, with the jawbone of a donkey, I have slain 1,000 men. Samson starts singing. First thing you notice is nobody's singing with him. Nobody's celebrating. Why? The cowards are still worried about the Philistines. The other thing you notice in the song is Samson doesn't give God any praise. The very next verse says, and it was, he had finished speaking, he had a jawbone in his hand, he called the place Ramath Lehi, then he became very thirsty. Why? God humbles him and shows him that he's not dependent on himself, he's dependent on God. God brings water miraculously to him, but Samson then gives glory to God for the victory. It isn't Samson's strength, it's God's strength through Samson. And we need to watch that we don't steal God's glory to ourselves whenever our situation arises. If God gives you triumph and your church is successful, for heaven's sakes, don't take the glory to yourself. Give it to God. If you don't, He'll soon put you in a very dry land and you'll become very thirsty. And this chapter ends with that He judged Israel for 20 years in the land of the Philistines, in the time of the Philistines. So when you come back next week, if you will, we're going to learn our lesson about women again. 2 more women for Samson, one of them named Delilah, which is what you've been waiting for. Come back next week, will you? And we'll see what lessons he can learn and you can learn too. Thanks.
As I traveled on my journey, few and far between, were the pilgrims I found faithful to their loving King. Soon I overtook a young man walking in the way, and I could see within his eyes that he was there to stay. He was faithful as a brother, he was faithful as a friend, looking for a lasting city, faithful to the end. Even when the road grew rugged and the sky turned black, trusting in his King, he had no thought of turning back. In the midst of persecution, with his dying breath, magnified the one who kept him faithful unto death. He was faithful